think I love tennis now more than I love football. I cannot watch football matches. I think it's too boring. These are the words of two-time World Cup winner Ronaldo Nazario, and he isn't the only one who shares said beliefs, as fans, former players, and managers alike have questioned the entertainment value of the modern game. The enjoyment of football seems to have diminished over the years with the rise of billionaire owners, the over-commercialization of the sport, and the lack of free, enigmatic footballers. Is it a case of the beautiful game losing the magic, spark, and relatability that made us fall in love initially, or just an inertia to adapt and enjoy the modern day version of the game? The unusual way in which I stumbled upon this topic, despite it always being at the back of my mind, was a thread on Twitter that spawned after a TikTok illustrated the decline of the sport since the 2006 World Cup. This was a tournament that was filled with superstars everywhere you looked. As reigning champions, Brazil had an aging but still brilliant side with the likes of Ronaldo Nazario, Gaucho Ronaldinho, Kaká, and Cafu, while host Germany boasted a young Bastian Schweinsteiger, World Cup all-time leading goalscorer Miroslav Klose, Mario Gomez, Lucas Podolski, and Arsenal goalkeeper Jens Lehmann. The French had Zinedine Zidane, Thierry Henry, Franck Ribéry, Patrick Vieira, while Portugal had a young Cristiano Ronaldo, led by Luis Figo and Deco. And eventual winners Italy boasted the likes of Andrea Pirlo, Gianluigi Buffon, Del Piero, Totti, and would go on to be Ballon d'Or winner Fabio Cannavaro. And that's all without mentioning the golden generation of England, who had the likes of Frank Lampard, Paul Scholes, and Steven Gerrard. Or even Spain, who had a dynasty awaiting with the likes of Andres Iniesta, Xavi Hernandez, and David Villa. The elite players of that generation were enigmatic, godlike footballers. The modern day still boasts supremely gifted, talented players, but none with the same invention of Andres Iniesta or the silk of Zinedine Zidane, and nowhere near the verve of Ronaldinho Gaucho. But the question is, where did they actually go? Well, those players did retire, but following in their footsteps are much more robotic players. Players who are naturally seen as cogs in a machine, performing a role and fitted to complete a certain task in any given game. There isn't that same liberty afforded to players to express themselves and problem solve in challenging and demanding games. As a result, there is a real scarcity of mavericks in the modern game. Gone are the days of Gaucho Ronaldinho, Riquelme, or even recently Neymar Jr. The birthplace of this free-flowing, beautiful, expressive football, Brazil, they don't even represent that anymore. Ronaldinho said on the current iteration of the Seleção before the Copa America, "I will not be watching a single game. They lack everything: grit, joy, good football." And those are three words that you would always associate with Brazil, even as early as the 2014 World Cup, albeit the national team was beginning to be on the decline, but there was still that sense of freedom and joy involved in the way in which the Brazilians played. And the main reason for this loss of invention in Brazil is the immigration of young starlets to Europe. Brazilian greats of the previous generations such as Kaká, Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos, Neymar, and even as far back as Rivaldo in the 2002 World Cup, all left Brazil in their early to mid-20s, Rivaldo leaving as late as 25. However, now you see some leave as early as 16, Endrick being a prime example, to join youth academies across Europe at some of the biggest clubs on the planet. And how are they meant to assimilate the flamboyant style of play that you learn in the favelas? They arrive in Europe and they're taught to keep the ball, maintain control, and look for an open teammate. Therefore, you see the Brazilian side of the modern game less inventive in their approach to the game. In essence, you can say that they play European football. These Brazilian clubs sell early because they can't compete with the wealth of European super clubs. South American football is nowhere near where it was decades ago. In the era of Pelé, South American teams were the best teams in the world, as Santos would line up against the likes of Real Madrid, Benfica, Barcelona, and the like, believing that they could beat them on any given day. Or even as recently as the year 2000, Boca Juniors would defeat Real Madrid and stand toe-to-toe with them, as Riquelme ran the show, Real Madrid the then European champions at the time. South America was seen as a respectable place to ply your trade. However, with the influx of investment in the European game, that is no longer the case. Brazilian and South American football as a whole has suffered, with only one South American side winning the World Cup in the last 22 years. And in that same time span, only one side has reached the World Cup final, both of those sides being Argentina. In the last 5 World Cup finals, 3 of them have been all European affairs. With the rise and dominance of European football, it seems Brazil and perhaps South America as a whole are trying to copy the Europeans' playbook, rather than stick to their own, which made them so successful in the first place. That incredible, beautiful football that we talked about was illustrated in people such as Juan Roman Riquelme that we mentioned before, one of many prestigious number 10s in the bygone era, players who captured the hearts of fans across the world. Johan Cruyff, Diego Maradona, Michel Platini, Dennis Bergkamp, Zinedine Zidane, Zico, Roberto Baggio. These players were given free rein to dictate the game as they saw fit, popping up in unusual positions and at times winning the game on their very own. But in the modern game, the number 10 position is seen as a liability, associated with lazy, arrogant players who expect the rest of the team to work for them. Now, these players could change the game in an instant, hence the supporting cast willingly surrendered the headlines to facilitate their number 10 strengths. The supporting cast played for the number 10, and in return the number 10 struck gold, game in, game out. And one of the few sides still giving their number 10 free rein to dictate the game as he sees fit is Argentina. Their number 10, Lionel Messi, 8-time Ballon d'Or winner, said in an interview, "The Guardiola era has caused a bit of confusion. Everyone wants to play like that now. They tell 6 and 7-year-olds to play with 2 touches, quickly. At that age, what happened with me needs to happen for these kids. We shouldn't take away their spontaneity." Unexpectedly, you will see this reflected at the highest level, as exciting players are described as ineffective, poor decision makers, or unnecessary. Modern youth programs prioritize winning over the development of players, encouraging athleticism over supreme footballing ability. Thus, we see more footballers in the modern game with less genuine, incredible footballing quality. While I don't believe the overall quality of football has diminished, I do believe the disparity between the elite and the average levels has definitely decreased, both having to do with the fact that the elite level has fallen, as well as the fact that the average level has improved drastically. Advocates for modern day football will tell you that Messi and Ronaldo have skewed our standards of what an elite player should look like. But then I would tell you that even in the Messi and Ronaldo era, there were all-time players who never came close to the prestigious awards or the headlines that those two were given throughout their careers. The likes of Suarez, Neymar, Robben, Ribéry, Iniesta, Xavi, Eden Hazard, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the list goes on and on and on. We all know Messi and Ronaldo were the S-tier players of the game, but there were still incredible players in the tier below them. But now it feels as though there's that disconnect between the elite players and the rest of the world. Of course, there is still the cream of the crop, with the likes of Vinicius Jr., Kylian Mbappe, Rodri, Luka Modric, Toni Kroos before he retired. But the next level beneath them consists of names such as Bukayo Saka, Phil Foden, and Rafael Leao, who undoubtedly are all great players, but at times don't show the consistency or out-of-this-world quality that we saw from the second tier of the former generation. Frankly, I may be seen as a hypocrite given the type of videos in which I produce, talking about the tactical intricacies of teams around the world. But at the end of the day, at the beginning of my footballing journey, the main reason that I watched football was to see the best players competing at the highest level, doing things that me watching at home, as well as I'm guessing many around the world, could only dream of doing. With the unfortunate drop in elite player quality, we've seen teams become the highlight rather than the individuals themselves. Managers have become the narrative rather than the players. Their philosophies are the main point of attraction as players are used as chess pieces striving to take advantage of the opposition's weaknesses. Pep Guardiola for a long time has been defined as the destroyer of modern-day football due to his methodical style of play, which has garnered him success and ultimately impacted the way that football has been seen around the world. One thing many people tend to forget is actually the fact that Pep Guardiola has adapted his philosophy throughout the years. The way his Manchester City side play now is not the way they played when he initially arrived. The same way his Barcelona side of the late 2000s is not the same way his Manchester City of now play. Despite Pep Guardiola's very intricate and rather detailed systems, he's always quick to applaud his players' ability to solve problems on their own. As teams nowadays are so well set up to combat individual brilliance, it's very likely that if Pep Guardiola's system were to perhaps not come to fruition in a certain game, his players would be the ones responsible for getting anything out of the game. But for me, the problem isn't Pep Guardiola, but rather the problem is teams who have average players trying to play incredibly intricate football. Teams who don't have players anywhere near the quality of Manchester City or even anywhere near the quality of World 11s, striving to play total football inspired by Johan Cruyff. You see teams trying to tactically outwit one another in big games rather than in essence just playing football. And I know it sounds ridiculous what I'm saying on a fundamental level. Why would you just go out there and play football, risking the opportunity of losing games? But I believe that's a firm reason why the appreciation for managers such as Jurgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, and Carlo Ancelotti will continue to grow as football continues to go the way it's going. Because they played football their own way. They played football based on the resources they had. They played football based on the players they had, and they built their team in their own image. Pep Guardiola has his own system and he has his own philosophy, but so did Jose Mourinho. You know a Jose Mourinho team is going to be tight, compact, and difficult to break down. You know a Jurgen Klopp team is going to be electric, dynamic, and difficult to beat physically. And you know a Carlo Ancelotti team is going to be balanced and is going to have incredible individuals who will bail him out of jail game in, game out. And it's different. And I feel like you need that difference in football to actually bring some neutrality to the game. If everybody's playing the same way, how exactly are any fans supposed to get behind anything different? Everybody's just going to support the exact same thing, and it leads to you constantly seeing games where two teams that are playing against one another look the complete and exact same. And within all this analysis that we have in the modern game, I believe a major issue is the obsession with the statistics of players rather than the actual performances that we're watching on our screens. I think statistics have become so inflated in importance that now we'd rather give more importance to what it is that a player does in terms of goals and assists and tackles, rather than how they genuinely played on the field and how they impacted the game for their team. Social media has played a huge part in this, as fans have become more reactive, detailed, and impulsive. We've become exposed to so much football that the mystery involved in football is pretty much gone. You have people nowadays watching a football game and creating a 5-minute highlight just as the game is over, and basically clowning a player for not having a real impact in the game. Or if they did have an impact in the game, it's because they played a bad opposition. The legends of the previous generations were not as accessible as this. We couldn't watch compilations of their games as accessible as they are now. Instead, the few glimpses of them that you did have were in the big games. It felt different when you saw Zinedine Zidane or Ronaldo Nazario on your screen, and rarely ever did they disappoint. Zinedine Zidane was not this prolific goals and assists merchant that the compilations will make you believe. He was silky, he was brilliant on the ball, and we rarely ever saw the bad moments in Zinedine Zidane's career. But what we did see was the volley in the 2002 Champions League final, the 2006 World Cup swan song as he bid goodbye to the beautiful game, the 1998 virtuoso performances against Brazil and Italy in the final, or Euro 2000 where he was the best player in the tournament for France as they won a European championship right after winning the World Cup in '98. But if you're performing in these stages, if you're playing well against these teams when the whole world is watching, why does it matter what you did against Mallorca or Bologna, with all due respect? But nowadays, everybody sees every single game. The magic you performed in the last game is irrelevant if you don't do anything in the game after that. Kylian Mbappe, who's been under a lot of criticism recently, this man scored a World Cup hat-trick. Yet you still have people questioning whether this is an all-timer player, questioning whether this is a player who deserves to be playing for the biggest team in the world. Kylian Mbappe. I mean, going back to Zinedine Zidane, he scored 125 goals and registered 141 assists in his illustrious career. Ballon d'Or winner, Champions League winner, Euro winner, World Cup winner. But this is a man who never registered more than 20 goals or assists in a single season. Yet, he's regarded as arguably the best midfielder of all time. Because he was an entertainer. Because he got you up off your seat. He did things that not many players actually did on a week-to-week basis. He didn't have the numbers of a Frank Lampard or even of a Steven Gerrard, but he got you out of your seat and he made you dream about something. And that's what we watch football for. Ratings and statistics, I always say, aren't there to replace the story, but actually to complement the story. In summary, while I do believe that football has lost a lot of the quality that made us fall in love with it initially, I remember watching the Champions League final in 2015 in which Neymar Jr. scored the winning goal and we were crowned European champions for the 5th time in our history. And he ran off into the crowd, took his shirt off, and that was the apex. That was the moment that Neymar Jr. wrote his name into folklore. It was a moment that he will never forget, and it's a moment that I will never forget. Not just because we had won the Champions League, but because Neymar Jr. was everything that every young player wanted to be. Fearless, dynamic, incredible, brave, fun, enjoyable, joyous, joga bonito. Neymar Jr. wasn't just a 'Neymar Jr. was a hero. He was an idol. And I think that entertainment that you have in the sport is definitely deteriorating with the way football is going. But I don't think it's deteriorating at the speed with which many people make it seem. Some of the legends we talk about, such as Neymar, they're only gone because they've hung up their boots, and we only talk about them because they have hung up their boots, allowing us to look back and give them the flowers that they deserve. In the modern game, your last action is only your important action. We don't look at football with this big picture and acknowledge the greatness that we are actually witnessing. Toni Kroos, for example, rarely got many plaudits until he announced his retirement recently. The legacy of Cristiano Ronaldo seems to be being rewritten with every passing year and every passing month as he continues to kick it about in the Camel League or in the Saudi Arabian League. And there are still doubts, I say it again, over Kylian Mbappe, who scored a Champions League World Cup hat-trick, a World Cup hat-trick, and has the same number of World Cup goals as Pele. I believe the sport perhaps is losing its magic, or maybe we as viewers are the ones doing it. Many of us who grew up watching the sport were there when Messi and Ronaldo were there, or if you're older, when Ronaldinho and Zidane were there, or if you're even older, when R9 was there, or if you're even older, when Maradona was there. Gone are the summers when you would wake up and watch the international tournaments kick off from 2 and you would go to bed at 10 after watching the last game. The passion to recreate the Ronaldo free kick or perform Neymar's silky joga bonito skills aren't as prominent as they were before. And that's fine. As you grow up, we sieve out the bad moments in our past, only highlighting the major good moments. Nostalgia, as many would call it. And I believe the prime example of this is the Argentina fans before and after the 2022 World Cup. Even to this day, I guarantee you there are many people, despite Lionel Messi's antics at the World Cup, despite reaching the zenith with his country, Argentinians across the country will tell you that Diego Maradona is still a better player for Argentina. Despite what the statistics will tell you, despite what the footage will tell you, despite what any professional player will probably tell you. But that's their Messi. That's the superhuman that they marveled at on their TV screens in '86, just as we did in '22. And I assure you, they would have told you then, there will never be another Maradona. Just as we say now, there will never be another Lionel Messi. But football will continue. And in players like Lamine Yamal, Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., and many others in this new generation that I think is being very much slept on, I believe the beautiful game still has a lot to offer, even if it isn't in the same mold as it was before.